Hello and welcome to episode 52 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogon1701. With me is a man who, thanks to a recent Supreme Court decision, is finally able to make that $17 million campaign contribution in the race for school board in Lawrence, Kansas. Greendragoon.
I can't comment on any ongoing campaigns.
And we have the television military consultant for How I Met Your Mother, Markhawkman.
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
I don't imagine they get a lot of use out of you, but... Our resident Chupacabra rancher, Hippiejohn, is actually having mic issues, so he won't be able to join us tonight, but he is in the chat room, and he did leave us with a topic. But we do have a guest, Paxfederetica, one of our favorite Foundry authors.
Hello, everyone.
Glad to have you back with us. So let's see. More season 9 things keep popping up on Tribble. Nothing purely Foundry related yet so far, but there is a couple of items. Cryptic Joe Jing, who's one of the character artists, said he was told by other team members that the new complexion and head styles that they have added should be going into the Foundry Creator. Here's the quote he left on the forums. Just checked with the production and how Stowe's setup works. These heads should be available in UGC automatically. He emphasized should, and as we know, don't take anything as promises. Let's see. Also, in talking with Taco on Twitter, he mentioned that the console that everybody and their mother uses for grind missions, exploits, published playtests, and even story missions on ESD is now somewhere in the ops area. This is the area in front of Quinn's office, down the stairs, the part with the ESD hologram and Captain Sulu. He didn't say exactly where in that area, though.
I was trying to convince him to put it on the far side of the shuttle bay.
Yeah. And well, we joke about it as the exploit console, but a lot of legit people use it too.
That's true,
but I use it for when I'm playtesting something.
But it's
convenient.
And that's just it. I think for me, it's just a little too convenient. And it gets overused because of it.
Well, I'm sure there will be a new convenient console. There's probably something by the transporter room. Which brings to a good point is that, in case any devs are listening, we'd really love to test these things. We want to test whether or not the character improvements are making it into the Foundry. We want to see where the doors are going to be on ESD and the objects and the NPCs. We want to test these things for you. But we can't because Foundry isn't turned on right now.
You never know. Maybe they're keeping the Foundry locked down because they're working on some super secret update. That's completely optimistic. That's completely optimistic, but hey, gotta keep your spirits up somehow.
I mean, we were at several points told that maybe something would be coming around season 9. Obviously, we haven't seen that pop up in any notes yet, but you never know.
I am hopeful that the new Taylor changes will get propagated to the Foundry.
Yeah, and I'm semi-hopeful for this too, just because...
I'd love to have
them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but of the stuff that tends to show up automatically, a lot of it is stuff that characters have at start. So a lot of for instance, like a lot of the Romulan costumes showed up, it was all stuff that you started out with versus stuff that gets unlocked.
Yeah, what we didn't get for the Romulans was the Republic uniforms, the Klingon aligned uniforms, the Fed aligned uniforms, that sort of thing. What we got was the civilian stuff that you can put on right away.
I don't know. Maybe if the new armors and kits and whatnot are unlocked from the start, maybe those will automatically show up in the Foundry as a result.
Yeah. So something that popped up on Tribble yesterday, I assume as a mistake, but people were able to access it, was I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's like a new area or some new things on Risa for the summer event.
The surfboard picture I saw showed the person standing on a surfboard next to the same pier that we were at last summer.
Mm-hmm. But I think there's at least some new areas in that map that we saw last summer. And Sir Boulevard was one of the people who was able to access it, and he provided us with kind of a list if you want to start throwing those screenshots up. He took some screenshots that we're going to show you. He says he's in the chat room. He says it's an upgrade to the existing Risa map. A map which I point out that in whole we would love to have added to the Foundry as usual. But he provided us with some kind of lists of the new assets that are there. Assets which of course would be great to have in the Foundry. So we have Risian restaurant tables and chairs, which are sort of wrought iron and painted in tropical colors. We have store shelves. We have fountain, hotel huts, hotel potted plants, flowering tree pots, floating spotlights. Floating spotlights would be awesome. Different building pieces, bar shelf, curved bar pieces, bar shelf props, horgons. Horgons on a stick. He says, no, seriously, this was an actual prop. A big horgon, Risian sand pails and shovels, Risian sand pockets. I'm not quite sure what that means. And then there's some costumes, wetsuits for male and female, which is like a full body thing. And I think that there are some new swimwear as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see there's a big like staircase thing in this in screenshot, and then of course I think probably what's going to be the biggest thing is hoverboards. At least I assume they're hoverboards unless they go in water, in which case they'd be surfboards.
He definitely looks like he's flying in this picture.
It does, yeah. I mean, Sir Boulevard's on, he can tell us.
Wait, where's the picture? I don't see the picture.
It's on the stream. You can't see
he says
it.
there are bikinis, one pieces, and the Picard Speedo. He says he doesn't want those in the Foundry. I mean, obviously that can encourage some weird things, some things that might not be appropriate, but...
You mean like the other stuff we have in the Foundry?
Yeah, like, the, some of the formal wear gets a little low cut, doesn't it? And some of the Orion costumes. He says they are hover surfboards. So, I don't know. Obviously, it kind of, he says they do not work on land. That's interesting. So they only work on water, but they do hover. Because, of course, Cryptic doesn't really have water mechanics. It's just a thing that you walk into and it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, they've got like swimming volumes that they use in like Champions. But yeah, it's mostly just a volume, and then there's a bit of an effect to make a splash on the surface. But other than that,
he says they're very fast. It sounds like fun.
I could totally see it turning into a PvP race.
Oh yeah. Which I love PvP races, by the way.
Yeah.
A lot of you know how much I did the PvP race at the winter, and it wasn't just because of the rewards. The rewards were excellent, and I wanted them, but I also did it because it was fun.
It is always fun when more people are involved.
So, I mean, that brings a good point, is that we would love to be able to designate a map where these things could be used, like the jetpacks from last year and from the latest featured episode series. How cool would it be to be able to set one map where you can use those things?
I don't know, I mean, it's one of those things that the jetpacks are kind of situational in that not everyone may have one.
It's true.
So it makes it kind of a tricky thing to add to the Foundry.
The jetpacks aren't very difficult, but yeah, I can definitely see there being issues if you make the map so that it requires a jetpack and the player doesn't have one.
Now you could, I mean, obviously we're talking about things that would require work on Cryptic's part and are therefore less likely. So you could make it so that you couldn't do the mission if you didn't have one in your inventory.
Yeah, but then that's all new tech then.
Oh yeah. I'm quite aware of that.
All new tech just to get missions with floaters in it.
But anyway, why don't we move along to what we've been working on, and why don't we ask our guest first? What have you been working on, Pax?
Well, whenever I'm not in actually playing or doing real life stuff, which unfortunately might be intervening hot and heavy fairly soon in the coming weeks, I've been obviously working on Valley of the Shadow 3. In fact, I've even, in case you might have noticed this already, but I've actually already published the first 3 maps of it for playtesting purposes. So if any of you want to go in and play test it for a while, be my guest. Please don't leave a comment or a review as an actual review. Just PM me with any feedback you have.
That, of course, is pretty good advice for every player out there. I mean, if you see somebody who's just testing something and it says test on there, please don't leave a review. If you have feedback for the author, obviously that's great. They may want that feedback, but it's pretty easy to send an email or find them in game to give that feedback rather than leaving a review. Because I discovered while doing Purity 6, because of course I think people must have been very eager to play that, because somebody within just like an hour of publishing a playtest version, somebody had played it and left a review. And obviously it wasn't quite ready for prime time yet. There were many things wrong with it still at that point.
Well, that's nothing. Not only have I gotten 1 review anyway, they even left me a $100 lithium tip.
So obviously, even in testing phase, it must be pretty decent.
I know when I do want to do a test, I'll publish it, grab it myself, and then pull it back down, and then I can share it with anyone I want to give the mission to.
Yeah, I mean, I know all the tips that we've given people. I mean, name it something, test, please do not rate, and things like that. And it was like, one of those things where it's the one time I didn't follow all of those tips is the one time when I should have. And somebody found it and played it.
Well, if I'm publishing something, even if it's only for testing purposes, I like to make it so that that people could actually play the mission as is. Even if the mission's not complete, I'll make sure to note that in the description. But I like to have it so that people could at least work their way to the end and finish the mission.
Mm-hmm. Or you can always make it so they can't find the start area, or can't.
Yeah, but that's a good way to get 1 starred.
When I first was testing Midas Part 1, I published it up with the mission door missing, saying, don't play, the mission door is hidden for secrecy and all that stuff. And I had someone leave a review is like, I'll play any mission I want, 5 stars. So I don't know whether they actually found the mission door and then liked the mission, or they were just being facetious.
So, Pax, I'm curious. What talking about, because we played actually both of your missions and even live streamed the part 2. Can you talk to us about the series as a whole? I mean, sort of what were your inspirations? How'd you come up with the story, things like that?
Well, I've mentioned this to you. I mentioned this on my previous appearances on Roundtable. This whole series is actually a prequel to my Ghosts of War series. It involves the same MacGuffin, that Thaleron satellite weapon system. But as I probably mentioned to you before, I finished the Ghosts of War series just before Legacy of Romulus came out, and once I started reading up on the Legacy of Romulus storyline, it occurred to me that dovetailed really nicely with the backstory that I had written for Ghosts of War. So that became the genesis of Valley of the Shadow. I would just create. I would just say that this weapon. I'd already established this weapon was developed as basically a terror weapon used by the Tal Shiar to deter their subject worlds from rebelling, sort of like the Death Star. So, I wrote this trilogy as basically the story behind that. And as I probably mentioned this, I think I might have mentioned this to you before, but I even made up I even had a little in joke in there. The planet's name, Neve 4, that's Yavin spelled in Yavin 4, which would have been a target for the Death Star.
Nice.
Well, I mean, the basic premise definitely sounds like something that I would expect the Tal Shiar to do, or at least be willing to do, even if they don't necessarily have the technical abilities to do it.
Something essentially horrible and nasty. I don't know. I certainly appreciate having some Romulan missions out there. Obviously, we don't have the functionality for that, but the more we can get people to do Romulan-centric missions for Romulan players, I mean, the better off we are. Obviously, you can make them now and hopefully convert them later.
Yeah.
Should we ever get such a functionality?
Yeah,
Yeah,
write it, publish it, and then maybe change the faction tag later when we actually have the ability to do it.
Because we even noticed that you were you had some things in there that were geared towards that, where you had some dialogues that were tagged as this is for Federation aligned Romulans, this one is for Klingon aligned Romulans.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So let's see, Dragoon, what have you been working on?
Well, work has been beating me up pretty hard, and so I've actually kind of had to drop any plans to be in the Foundry Challenge. Unfortunately, just the timing of it, with work requiring a lot of my extracurricular hours, I haven't been able to make any progress on it. So it's finally, I was like, you know what, I can't finish this in time. But one of these days, hopefully, I'll be able to enter a Foundry Challenge. That said, I did have a little bit of time, and I used that to get a bunch of fixes in the Shadow of Midas Part 1. So I've kind of had a list going for a while of various fixes and whatnot. And so Cast Modian added another one like a week or so ago, and so I just prodded enough to go in and try and finish those. Plus, I was able to go in and add a couple of small touchstones leading forward into Part 2.
So when you say fixes, like what sort of things do you mean?
A couple of typos. The big one was for anyone who, and when you played it, and you went to the Midas array, the binary stars, you'll remember, are way off in the distance, like in the back in the sky file, and they're really tiny.
I don't remember, but assume that I
Well,
do.
the fact that you didn't notice it at all is probably why. No, I mean they're tiny. Unless you were looking directly at them or made a point to look at them, you would notice them. But that's not how it originally worked. Originally, I had two like gas giants, and what I did was I set up the lighting in such a way so that it would blast onto these gas giants. They cause the bloom to blow out and make them look like suns. Well, then space lighting broke for custom maps,
Yeah.
and I had to pull them. So I finally figured out, like a week or so ago, that while space lighting is broken for custom maps, it's not broken for predefined map backgrounds. So I've been going through and trying to find a predefined background that has the lighting I need, and I finally found one that works pretty well, and it even has a slight blur effect going. So it actually kind of helps in making the gas giants look more like suns and not like gas giants. So I was finally able to add those back in, which is really nice because the whole idea is you go through this wormhole in the Midas array, and you've got these two big giant suns in the background, and so you go through the wormhole, and then you're through and they're gone. So that is finally back in, and I was really excited to get that back in. Added a couple of characters in the background that are in part two, but I didn't really invent until part two. So I was kind of bringing them, putting or retconning them back into the, although just as background characters that don't play any part.
You're
But
George Lucasing them.
pretty much, or it'd be more like if Anakin Skywalker, young Anakin Skywalker, walked in through the background. One of the scenes that'd be about it.
Sounds good. Definitely still on my list of things to do is go back and get my original series up to the quality of what I can do now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, even since I did part one, how much I've learned, and even some of the new features that we've gained since then. Because I could add in things like patrols, and we back when I made this, we couldn't despawn NPCs, so I added that in.
That was like the major limitation I ran into when I was first making missions. Is I had to rewrite a whole sequence around that.
Yeah,
Which I think actually made it better, and I don't think I would change it if I went back.
I hit a character under a rock.
All right, Mark, have you been able to do any work in the Foundry lately?
Nothing significant. I haven't really found a lot of time for that lately, so.
I understand how that goes. Neither have I. Between work and other things in the mirror event, which I've been doing very heavily, I haven't found too much time either. But I'm at a point in my script where I've done most of the exposition stuff, and I'm into the maps where it's just mostly going to be action. And I did a little work this week on trying to come up with a cool thing for the ending space battle, which is essentially going to be an escort. You're going to escort a ship while other ships are fighting off the Borg all around you. And I'm trying to figure out, how can we make this exciting and have you do some fighting, but make sure that the ship makes it, like without a shadow of a doubt, makes it to the end. I think maybe one of the ways to do that could be to make sure that the only ones that come near you are like weak mobs, and that the escorting the ship you're escorting is a battleship. And then I think for the background things I have going, you're going to spawn at one end of the map with a bunch of allied ships around you. They're going to go off in sort of in two directions, in front and a little to the side of you, and engage Borg ships along the flanks. And you're going to go right up the middle with this other ship. And then maybe I'll spawn a few specific mobs along your way, like weak mobs or frigate mobs, to make sure that the ship you're escorting doesn't die. And I may add something at the end where it asks you, so did the ship blow up? And if you answer yes, they're going to be like, oh, well, fine. It's no big deal. We have a backup. We'll send that in right now.
You could also have have it triggered that if the ship is destroyed. Well, that's going to be really hard because you're probably off hiding the rest of the group.
No, go ahead anyway.
I was going to say.
I'm curious what you were thinking.
I was thinking that if just put a trigger on the friendly NPCs that if they're killed. Although I guess you can't do that anymore, can you? They blocked it.
You can't do a component complete on...
I don't think you can do a component complete on a friendly mob anymore.
Really?
I seem to vaguely remember that changed.
Well, I could instead put dialogue at the end that says, if it was destroyed, when you reach the final whatever, interact or reach marker or whatever it's going to be, probably interact because I hate reach markers. Say something where if you said yes, it was destroyed, your transporter officer will pipe up and said, "Sir, we emergency beamed out their equipment and the technicians that we need onto our ship so we can do the thing."
What you could actually, now that I think about it, what you could do is at the end of your patrol, put a reach marker that despawns the patrolling ship and spawns in a NPC. of the ship.
Well, that works at the end, but you want to have it where, because you can only have patrols on NPC groups.
Yeah.
So it's got to be an NPC group through the whole thing, and it's gonna, it's obviously gonna shoot at anything that attacks it, and it's gonna stop and attack, and then go back
Yeah.
to its patrol. But it can be destroyed along the way.
Yeah. I wish we had
So
a few more
I got to
options.
plan for that a little bit.
I wish we had a few more options, like a single ship that was real, like nigh unkillable, but
Mhm.
like had next to worthless weapons.
Or if we could use two variables, like you could have it be timid creature, and you could have it do a patrol. Obviously, timid
Yeah,
creature
except that,
isn't what we'd like it to be. But
well, yeah, and they can't make it the way we want it because we all know
no,
how that went out.
we all know how that went down. That's why we can't have nice things. But anyway, that's where I'm at. I mean, hopefully, because I will be done within the next like 2 days, probably, completely done with the mirror event, and so I will have time to work on Foundry. So hopefully I'll get that done. Because I think Pax, you tweeted out earlier this week, I think, that something like you wanted to see more Romulan missions out there because yours was not like the only one.
Yeah, there are a few other. There are only two others that I'm aware of that are done. Homesick Heroes by Amahood and Infinite Shift by, I don't remember who it's by.
The name sounds familiar. Well, I'll tell you this, because mine's going to be Romulan, and I think a couple other, mine's going to be KDF line Romulan, actually. I may do a copy for Fed, but anybody else who's doing a Romulan mission, let us know, so we can get you some publicity, and we'll put it out there for you. All right, we actually don't have any mission reviews this week. I told Duke of Rock that I would do his latest mission. I did not, unfortunately, get to it, but I promise I will get to that for next week. So let's move on to discussion topics. Dragoon, you had one.
Yeah. It's actually something that kind of came out of something we were talking about this morning on Twitter, and we got to talking about episode or basically where things from our missions are inspired from. Where do we like pull story elements from? I mean, where do we go to for inspiration? And I thought that would be an excellent subject kind of for us to kind of talk about. Is like, so where do you guys go for inspiration when you're trying to write a founder mission?
So I tend to go to TV shows, and usually not Star Trek. As funny as that sounds, I think
Well,
I mentioned
yeah,
before. Go ahead, Mark.
to a certain extent, that's true for me too, because some of mine are, shall we say, strangely inspired. Although one of mine was actually inspired by a, a Nintendo DS game. Although I haven't actually published that one yet, have I? Yeah, never mind.
A Nintendo DS game, huh? Which game?
You remember how I mentioned a while back about how I was working on making a replica of Brigadoon Castle in the Foundry? Well, Brigadoon Castle is a location that you visit in the Dragon Quest IX game.
Well, I know I've seen people pull inspiration from a lot of different places, like other video games, cartoons, obviously in the hippies case. I like to pull inspiration from Stargate. I mean, I had this whole sequence in one of my previous missions, unpublished at the moment, but where your ship is heavily damaged. There's an enemy ship that's equally heavily damaged out there. They have breathable atmosphere. You don't. Yours is running out fast. What do? You try and beam over and take their ship? from them. That's just completely out of Stargate. One episode of Stargate Atlantis. Obviously, I didn't plagiarize anything because I put it all in my own words and made twisted it up to suit
I
the
mean,
situation and everything. Obviously, you don't want to copy, but nothing exists in a vacuum. I mean, we all take inspiration from somewhere.
I see. I mean, I'm kind of different in mind that I do actually pull a lot from Star Trek episodes, which seemed like a very natural source for me. I know. I mean, we were talking about it earlier. I was commenting that the Eidolon in my mission, these beings that take over human hosts, are actually inspired by the wisps from Enterprise, where Enterprise comes across this ship full of these little wispy energy beings, and who want to take over the Enterprise, replace the Enterprise crew because their ship is disintegrating. And so I kind of took that to the nth degree and made their intentions more intentional. So that's kind of where that kind of came out. In fact, for a while I was going to touchstone it, but it seemed
Just make it the same entities.
yeah. But it's unfortunately with such a vast distance in setting, it didn't. There was just no good opportunity, and I had to invent a few new rules for the race, and so I kind of dropped trying to do a touchstone. Um, but yeah, I mean, like the ending cliffhanger is totally from a kind of a play on it's like in the latter part of season 3. There's the episode of Zodi Prime where it ends with basically Enterprise completely crippled and surrounded, and
Which is somewhat similar to how you ended yours.
yeah, except that we can't cripple ships. I mean, not
Well,
really
not exactly.
in the Foundry, so I had to come up with another way to cripple the ship.
What you can kind of do is just have somebody say the ship has been crippled.
Yeah, but I wanted to do it in such a way that it's totally believable that there's absolutely nothing. Your shield and hull are still at 100%, but there's something else wrong that is preventing you from just going out and attacking them.
Yeah, I remember the conversation now because we were talking about cliffhangers, and obviously a subject near and dear to your heart, since you even have that style named after you now. Um, and what was it? I misinterpreted your tweet, and I thought you said you were inspired by the end of season 3
Oh yeah,
cliffhanger, which
with
I
the
think is one of the silliest cliffhangers I've ever seen. And you know me, I like everything,
yeah,
so for me to say that is like,
it was a little random, but come on, like time traveling
yes,
space Nazis. How is that not Star Trek?
Yeah.
It's like
it's absolutely Star Trek.
it's like
It's just like, oh my god, completely out of left field.
yeah.
Well, honestly, I loved the not cool. I thought that they were some really cool new bad guys.
Yeah, I would have loved those episodes. I mean, it's exactly the same thing with the finale of Enterprise. Is that I would have loved those episodes if they were in different places in the season.
Yeah, I mean, because Enterprise had a very awkward way of going about making a plot line. Because the Xindi arc meandered like crazy while they were going through that weird expanse place, and then they find the shattered remains of the Xindi homeworld and are kind of like, okay, now what do we do? and
There were
then
some
it
stumbles along the way,
ended a few episodes later.
But I mean, getting back to my point, I mean, just taking like what you just said, there were like so many. I mean, even just coming up with some like random episode from Star Trek, there are so many like ideas that you can pull out because maybe you could do a mission.
So many different threads that you can take. Like I've always wanted to see somebody do, and maybe somebody has, an episode about the aliens from Conspiracy in the first season of TNG, the ones that almost took over Starfleet.
There were a couple of DS9 novels written that revolved around them.
Yeah, I mean, Cryptic has no trouble finding lots of things to pull and expand
Oh yeah,
upon.
absolutely.
Why not Foundry authors?
We can absolutely do that.
It's funny.
I don't know. Maybe I'll get to it myself.
I just got done going through the animated series, which I had never watched before. And while I wouldn't give it as mark it as a great source of storytelling, they definitely had a lot of different interesting concepts that they explored, or
Aquan.
situations that they presented that could be potential Foundry fodder.
The Aquans were a really fun episode.
That was the ones with the underwater humanoids.
Yes. And another one of my personal favorites was the Delta Triangle episode.
Oh, with the void space, like,
Yeah.
because I mean, yeah, I mean, you could have total fun with a episode where your ship gets trapped in like a null space pocket, and
one of my current Foundry missions is actually a follow up to the time trap episode, because I mean what it is it's one of those things where you start out by getting this distress call from some random Federation ship, which as a callback to the episode, the ship that you're looking for is named the Bonaventure, which was the name of one of the Federation ships that was trapped in Elysia. So you're looking for that ship, and then you find this subspace rift that leads to a subspace pocket with a bunch of people living in it, but it's not really Elysia. It's someplace else that
yeah.
is similar and in a similar location, but it's not the same place.
And there was even one or two Voyager episodes which kind of had that pocket of subspace trap.
Yep.
In it.
And there, no offense to Star Trek Online, but my all-time favorite Star Trek game of them all is the first Elite Force, which is kind of along those lines of you get trapped in some kind of weird, empty space pocket. You can't get out. There's a bunch of other ships there, with scavengers and Borg and Species 8472. And I don't know, it was just a great game.
Yeah. Elite Force. There were only 2 Star Trek games before STO that I ever played from start to finish. One was Hidden Evil, another Activision title, and the other was Elite Force. And I also loved Elite Force's theme music. I mean, I thought it rivaled
absolutely
any of the series. And I do have the special. I did get the special edition, so I actually have the
soundtrack,
theme music on CD.
Yep, I still got that. It was the funniest thing is because it's a first person shooter. It's it's obviously focused on that and combat, but it still managed to capture. It's just sort of the essence of Star Trek, and I don't know. It's something you can't really put your finger on, but it managed to do that.
A heavy focus on storytelling for one.
It did, yeah, it absolutely did.
Well, one of my personal favorites, even though it wasn't focused around storytelling, was the Birth of the Federation game.
I always liked that one too.
That one was mainly because of the sheer, I guess you could say, nerd factor that the developers seem to have had, because it was basically TNG with a few aspects of Deep Space Nine, first season or two, mixed together to make a cohesive universe for the game to take place in. I mean, because you had several dozen races that showed up as the villain of the week for TNG, and maybe a few from Deep Space Nine that were the minor races that you would encounter in the game.
And I know I've played at least one Foundry mission that, not a specific story from that game, was heavily modeled after Star Trek 25th anniversary in format and style.
And we should mention that specifically bringing in things from these games that were created by these games developers is against the EULA.
Yeah. Well, I mean, plagiarism in general is a bad idea.
Well, yeah. I mean, but we can, inspired by is something that obviously we do a lot here. So we're definitely okay with that.
And like I said, in this particular case, the mission was not a copy of one of the stories from 25th Anniversary, but instead just the kind of the style of going through and having to problem solve and put pieces together until you and then getting a rating at the end.
I have to say that was one of those games that I always walked by in the store. Back when we actually bought things for computers in stores, and I just always walked by it and never bought it.
I always kind of considered it like the first of the great Star Trek games, just because it's the one that really, the first one that got Star Trek.
I always remember some of the ones for like Nintendo and Super Nintendo as some of the first that I ever played.
Yeah, this was better than those.
I don't
um,
remember those as being particularly noteworthy.
yeah, those are just platformers with a Star Trek skin. I remember the Deep Space Nine one playing through that a bit, and that was exceptionally bad because it just seemed wrong for every books to be jumping around between platforms.
Well, didn't someone make a Star Trek themed mod for Doom?
Oh, there's been Star Trek themed mods for all kinds of different things. The latest one I've heard a lot about is for Sins of a Solar Empire,
Hmm.
which if you've never played it, is a really good game. It's one of those that will just completely dominate an afternoon, and you'll look up and realize you've been playing it for 6 hours. And it's a real time strategy game where you manage, essentially a empire between several different star systems, and you got to build fleets and build up your planets so you can build more fleets and war with other people. And so they've made they're calling it Armada 3.
I've heard about it.
I heard of that actually.
Yeah. It looks really good. One of these days I'm going to have a download and check it out
Yeah.
because I've
Well, Sins
got
of a
Sins of.
Solar Empire ever goes on sale on Steam, I might pick it up just so I can
Oh,
play the mod.
Yeah, sure will.
have you guys ever played Space Empires 5?
I have not.
Well, it's a 4X game, so it's not really what you would call story or action focused. It's one of those Empire level strategy games. But there's a reasonably good mod for it that is themed on Star Trek.
Reasonably good. Didn't you make it?
Yes. Well, people tell
I
me
admit
they
to doing
like it, so hey,
I admit to doing a little bit of modding in my past. I mean, very low grade stuff. And I know we have some modders in our community. I mean, Kirkfat told me the other day that he made a few multiplayer maps for Elite Force back in the day.
I tried to do a map of Stargate Command for Elite Force.
I was never any good at that stuff. The map makers, it was all just too complicated. The things that I could do were like the mission builder for like TIE Fighter, because it did all the behind the scenes stuff for you, like the Foundry, and all you had to do was plop down the ships, figure the warp in points and warp out points, or hyperspace because it's Star Wars, and patrol routes and objectives and things like that. That I could do, and so that translates very well into the Foundry. But I think all those were, when you're dealing with third party stuff, you can have a little bit more in depth dev tools. Than you would if the developer is going to make it, because the developer is going to want to make it to appeal to as wide an audience as it can. So it's going to be simplified. It's going to do a lot of things for you, like the Foundry does.
Yeah. So, are there any other aspects of inspiration for Foundry missions that we want to cover?
Oh, I don't know. You can really draw inspiration. I mean, it's like any sort of writing you do. You can draw inspiration from just about anywhere.
Yeah.
And
Real life.
I mentioned. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
No, I was done. Go ahead.
I mentioned Valley of the Shadow earlier, where and I know it uses the same Thaleron weapon system that Ghosts of War does. The idea for that, as you might have guessed, came from the movies, specifically Nemesis. And it occurred to me that hey, it would be kind of cool if I could be able to depict a planet that's been attacked by a Thaleron weapon. So that's why I didn't go to War Part 1. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I basically took that moonscape that you use in Purity 3 and just put the just just had dust and mist effects to make it look like the entire atmosphere had been permeated with the Thaleron ash.
Mm.
Yeah, I imagine you can do a lot of nice effects.
One of the things that occurred to me when I was watching Nemesis is that the ways that the Romulans employed Thaleron weaponry in that movie actually give you a whole lot of, shall we say, variations on possible do with Thaleron in terms of making weaponry. I mean, because, you know, when you first see Thaleron radiation in the movie, it's being used to assassinate the Romulan Senate in the form of what's essentially a grenade. Which, you know, this is actually something that the Tal Shiar troops in the game, some of them actually have the ability to use things like that. But, you know, it's not something that you see a whole lot in the game. But, you know, it makes sense to be able to...
I kind of see it a lot when I fight Romulans. It's like anything like commander and captain mobs usually have it.
Yeah.
You got to destroy it right away, or it could, you know, kill your whole away team.
Yeah, or, you know, run for it. But well, the whole Thaleron satellite idea makes perfect sense from that perspective, because, you know, you put it in place, it goes whoosh, and people die.
Well, I mean, it also makes a lot of sense from the grounds that Thaleron radiation is incredibly dangerous. I mean, I'm not sure, aside from thematic effect, it was really kind of stupid to have your Thaleron generator just off the bridge on the Scimitar. I mean, this is like a seriously dangerous form of radiation. So having it on an unmanned satellite makes a lot of sense in that regard.
True.
Mm-hmm.
If it explodes, you don't have to worry about your people getting killed.
Exactly.
So we just had patch notes posted for tomorrow's patch. They have removed like some of the retrain and retrait tokens from the C-store. Obviously, these things will be obsolete now they've announced in Season 9, because you'll be able to do all that for free and kind of on the fly in sector space. Resolved an issue where powers were not being moved to the tray on Federation captains who chose to skip the tutorial, and they have actually removed the shuttle weekend and replaced it with a junior officer weekend for April 10 to 14.
Yay!
I think those give you extra bonus XP in your DOF assignments.
Actually, there's something more important than that with the Junior Officer Appreciation Day, because there's a free special purple duty officers that you get on that day, and you can't get it any other day.
Really?
Are you talking about the exocomps?
Yes. Well,
okay.
I got one of those one time. I don't know where it came from. So interesting. Well, cool, but obviously no Foundry notes, but, you know, that's how it goes.
You never know. I mean, how many times have things slipped into the Foundry that weren't in the notes?
Yeah, everybody go check everything in the Foundry right now, because, you know, obviously they don't like to do patch notes for us.
Well, we're definitely going to have to do some serious testing once we get access to Season 9.
Oh, yeah. Unless, you know, maybe... I really wish they would just open it up for us. I mean, unless they've got something planned for it, open it up, because I want to test some things.
I don't know. Maybe they're keeping it closed because they don't know what ends up in the Foundry.
This is true.
And so many things have slipped in.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we move it along to our next topic? Because I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, ways to improve our writing, ways to make ourselves better writers. Or to, you know, at least try and help that process along a little bit. Because I came up with a good one over the weekend. I didn't have much of anything to do. I was just doing some mirror universe stuff, and I put in the pilot episode of Firefly, and I listened to it with the commentary from Joss Whedon and Nathan Fillion, and I thought to myself, this is one of the things that I really like doing, and I think listening to writers and directors talk about their stuff, talk about their films and their TV shows, I think has made me a better writer, has made me think critically about things. Because Joss Whedon is one of those who everything in his there's nothing without meaning in his shows. Listen to the commentary on Firefly on an episode that says the title is Objects in Space, because he just he delves into his process and the things that are behind everything. Let's see. Another good one to listen to is Ridley Scott on any of his movies. Gladiator is a good one. The first Alien movie that he directed, that's an excellent commentary. Let's see. And Kingdom of Heaven is another good one. The Stargate shows are fantastic for commentaries because you get the DVD sets and they have almost every single one has a commentary with it. Obviously, there's lots of commentaries on that are available on the Star Trek movies. So go look for ones that have directors or writers, because that is essentially what we do. We're writing and directing small movies or TV episodes. Obviously, we have the added fun stuff of making it interactive and making the player as the main character, the unknowable player. But we can still take a lot of good advice from DVD commentaries, I think.
Well,
I don't know. Do you guys do that at all?
Of all the weird things to get writing inspiration from, one article that I've read that has given me a lot of, shall we say, food for thought on how to write things was actually written by Mark Rosewater.
Yeah, okay. Forgive me.
Not somebody I've heard of.
Well, he was actually one of the lead content designers for Magic the Gathering, which is why it's odd, because his philosophy towards writing, especially the villains, is that you need to give the person who's reading a reason to want to see the villain dead, but you also have to give a reason to make the villain seem scary, and so on. So here, I pulled it up. I'm just going to read off the main points.
Okay.
The villain's goals should directly conflict with the hero's, which, going back to Pax's thing he was talking about earlier, is that Tal Shiar trying to enslave populations with a Damocles swords type doomsday weapon. Yeah, that sounds about right. The villain should have some connection to the hero, even if it's the simple fact that the villain fights the hero. It's some sort of connection. It's not someone that the hero has never heard of or met. The villain should represent what the hero opposes. Like, the Tal Shiar represents tyranny, and the Romulan Republic represents freedom, etc. And the villain should be more powerful than the hero. Not necessarily overall, but they need to have some sort of I guess you could say, unfair advantage. Otherwise, it's not going to feel like a struggle for the hero to win. The hero needs to I guess you could say, have a challenge. And let's see here. Oh, well, that was the all four of the main points he made. Here, I'll post a link to it.
A lot of those, and this is one of my absolute favorite sites in the world, is TV Tropes. That goes through all of the different plot plot devices and cliches sometimes that appear in fiction and are sort of usable by writers, even because tropes are not bad things. They're just devices
Yeah.
you use to tell stories, and you can find that people have even made them for their Foundry missions or for other people's Foundry missions. I think I can't remember who was making those, but we've got some on there, which is pretty awesome, I think. Um,
I'm afraid to look. Is Greendragoon style cliffhanger around there?
it should be. I'm sure there's all sorts of different cliffhanger tropes that are out there, including the ones that you
Ooh,
used.
it was Sutherland. Sutherland quotes TV tropes almost daily.
Excellent. So let's see. One of the things that Hippie says in the chat room is, essentially, how do you get to be a better writer? Well, write a lot. I know that because writing is, I do it for my job, and I'm a better writer now than I was when I started, and experience counts for everything. Sir Boulevard says it was Starsword C and himself who were doing some of the TV trope stuff. Sir Boulevard says have somebody edit your work, which is a really good thing. Seeing somebody take a critical look at your work and then figuring out how to make it better from there makes you a better writer, because then you won't maybe do some of those things that you did wrong when you write your next thing. Obviously, read. If you're trying to get better at writing in a particular medium, read more of that medium. So obviously, for us, play Foundry missions. Read fan fiction. Go and look at fan films like I don't know, the Star Trek Continues guys and the things that they're doing. I'm actually kind of hoping that those guys, maybe the people who are writing the episodes, are going to be at Star Trek Vegas, because I'd love to talk to them. Or indeed any of the writers from the show. I think I mentioned at one point on the Blu-ray for TNG Season 3 is a roundtable discussion with 4 of the writers from TNG, which is an absolutely fabulous thing and well worth the hour and a half or whatever, however long it is.
Yep. That's probably my favorite special feature on the Blu-ray series so far, even more than the cast reunion.
To pause it for a moment, what he sounded very quiet to me. Does he sound quiet to you guys?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
I can't control any of you individually.
All right. Well, anyway, I was saying that that feature, the Writers Roundtable, is probably my favorite special feature on any of the TNG Blu-rays. Even I like it even more than the cast reunion in the season 2 set.
Just wait till they get to D Space Nine, though.
Well, I'm definitely going to enjoy that, because Ron Moore is one of my favorite TV writers and showrunners, and obviously he was one of the big hands behind DS9. So, all right, let's see. We had some other topics. One of the things that Hippie wanted to talk about is that so a while back on Primetime UGC, Captain Gecko, they were talking to him, and the discussion came up was, what can we realistically expect? We request a lot of things. What can we realistically expect? And he said, like 5 or 10 things as far as assets go to be added to the Foundry. And Hippie is wondering, do we request too many things?
Well, I mean,
does that sort of,
Well,
is
my
that
thoughts
helpful, hurtful?
my thoughts there is that if we give them a list of 25 or so things, then that means that they now have a list of things to choose from that we know would be helpful to us.
and we've
I
already
guess.
given them such a list.
We have indeed.
Yeah. 2 or 3 times.
Part of the problem, of course, is that we can't all agree on what we need. If we were limited to a few
everybody
things.
has their own list of wants.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we got a weighted list, and so there was a top 25.
Hippie is saying he said specifically 5 things. I don't remember what he said, so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
will
it was
trust
a very it was a
I'll
very
trust
low
Hippie on
number.
this. Yeah, it was a very low number, and obviously we want like a million things, because there's a million things that aren't in the Foundry.
We want everything.
Yeah, we essentially want
Why?
everything. Cryptic, of course, has to prioritize in a way that we do not on our wish lists. um, Let me just scroll down here and see. So he's essentially saying, is it our fault for being greedy and feeling and maybe entitlement that he said that we're not getting even that short list of things.
Nah.
So entitlement requires that we feel that we deserve things, and that is the question. Is is asking things for things and complaining, or basically turning around and saying that we deserve certain things, the same thing.
Well, I suppose that begs the question: is do we deserve certain to have these things added?
At the
I don't know if that's a yes or no question.
As much as we all hate it, the answer
yeah,
is no. In fairness, they don't have to
no, they
do
don't have to do
anything.
anything.
I mean,
And
we could.
there is a reality here that the Foundry may never get another update ever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That is a possibility.
It's an unlikely one, but yeah.
it is. I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
going
I
to
mean,
start doomsaying here.
I don't think it's going to happen that way, but it could. And so, I mean, that's the question: is what then?
So, I mean,
It's workable. It could go on as it has been.
I kind of follow a pattern. In fact, not too long ago, someone was posting a bunch of basically a wish list, and I mean, sure, it's wish list number 9,143. Um, and it was a bunch of things, and a lot of things that were probably never going to happen. And I posted in it, and I mean, after my first post, I realized I was basically just posting to tell them how much this isn't going to happen, and I realized that's one of the stupidest things I've ever done. I mean, there is nothing wrong with people suggesting things for the Foundry. I mean, who cares if it never happens? I mean, it
Well,
it
well,
doesn't preclude anyone's right to post suggestions and make
well,
requests.
well. One thing that I've thought of multiple times whenever I look at things like that is that the more we make lists of things, to me, it gives the devs more ideas about what they can possibly do.
Yeah, and I mean, whether short lists or long lists will ever have any impact on what does and doesn't get into the Foundry, I don't know, and none of us can say. It has a lot more to do with forces beyond our control,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. So I mean,
It is completely beyond our control.
so whether we come up with short lists or long lists, at the end of the day, they're going to give us stuff when A, they deem they have time for it, and B, that
Mhm.
the t- the effort put into it is justified.
Yep.
Now, here's sort of the other thing I think on entitlement is there's a difference between posting a list of wishes of saying, you know, I would like it if you would do this, and posting a list of I expect you to do this.
Yeah, or why haven't you added this yet?
Why haven't you yeah? Why haven't you done X yet? Is one of my pet peeves in, in Foundry, or
I
not in
mean,
Foundry, just in any thread.
and then there's the people who tried to say that the devs are actively trying to ruin the game because they don't do X, Y, or Z that this person
Yeah,
thinks they should be doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
which of
So
course, I mean, any reasonable person would say there is absolutely no reason for them to want to ruin their game. So they must think that doing X or not doing X benefits the game, or they don't have time to schedule that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that um, Cryptic is in no way contractually obligated to add a single thing to the Foundry, and even if every author who ever posts it on the forums were to suddenly quit, I don't think it would have a significant impact on the game. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of it. we can ask,
Yeah.
and they may listen to us, but we can't. We're not big enough to demand anything. I mean,
Ask and ye may receive at their pleasure.
and really, I mean, but the sad part of it is that I kind of see this kind of go through every once in a while through the forums, and it gets into this. I almost want to call it a "woe is me" kind of tone, and it's just this thing that we start kind of feeling sorry for ourselves, and of course nothing changes, and then we feel bad, and really we're just kind of keeping it on ourselves and having absolutely no impact on the devs. So I mean, we can choose to bemoan what updates we don't get, or we can choose to accept what we do and don't get, and move forward with what we can do.
I mean, that's why I always tend to say, expect nothing, predict nothing, and avoid disappointment for yourself, and just do with what you have. And if they add something, fantastic, that's great. If they don't add anything, well, then you're not disappointed because you didn't expect anything.
Yeah, I don't prescribe against being hopeful or hoping for new additions and whatnot. Um, and I measure my disappointment. I mean, I don't let it ruin my experience. Um,
Just don't base your happiness on what somebody else does.
yeah, exactly.
And especially in a game. And I mean, and always realize that we have no control over anything. I mean, we're customers. We're not investors or anyone with any kind of say on how the game is run.
Well, that sort of thought process comes up all the time when there are comic book related movies being put out, because people are like, oh my goodness, this is horrible, they did X, Y, or Z in the movie, why did they do such a thing? And I look at him like, okay, well, whatever.
Because they can.
Because
because
it's the
it's their
movie and not the
because it's their
comic book.
movie. I mean, and people like to sort of take psychological ownership of these things. It's the feeling of, this is my game. It's important to me. And that's great up to a point, but you can sort of let it go to your head and think that you have the right, to somehow demand things and them to be just done at the snap of your fingers. And obviously, we know that reality is much different.
One of the things I love to see in Foundry authors and in players in general is where they don't accept the situation for what it is. I mean, nor do they sit around and just complain about it, but they try to actively do something better. Um, I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Admiral Aaron is another Foundry author I follow on Twitter,
Yep.
and he has been advertising the heck out of a upcoming mission of his.
Oh yeah.
Which is, in fact, I'll go ahead and plug it. It's called Adrift, and doesn't have it out yet, but he has been like plugging it every chance he gets. And you know what? I mean, I noticed this, and while it won't appear in the top 50 when he publishes, I will still go and give it a play. So I mean, don't don't accept just because like our search sucks or we don't have all the assets we want or the Foundry is buggy or we don't have feature X or feature Y. Don't just accept it or sit around and bemoan it. I mean, go work around it. Um, do more.
But I don't want to discourage people from posting wish lists and requests,
No,
because
no,
I think
absolutely not.
there is always the chance that somebody's going to see that and say, somebody at Cryptic is going to see that and say, okay, yeah, we should do that.
But I mean, if it doesn't show up next month,
Yeah.
don't show up complaining about why
Mhm.
you didn't listen to me. I mean,
Yeah.
if you
And I
suggest it's
mean,
on them, if you complain, it's on us.
and I try and take any avenue I can Um, even to the point of posting in an introductory thread for a character artist who made her first or his, I don't know the gender, their first post on the forums, after getting an interesting answer to a question of kind of what they worked on. I posted, just to try and remind somebody, because you never know. Sometimes I get this feeling at Cryptic that there's some people who do have absolutely no notion of the Foundry, what it is, what it does, what it's missing. Um, I don't know if that's true or not, but I get that notion,
Yeah,
and so
I'm
it's
pretty
like I
sure
got to
that
put this in front of
some of them really don't.
anybody's eyes that I can.
yeah, yeah. I am not innocent of poking Gecko about the Foundry almost every chance I get, but at the same time, I'm not gonna start berating him because
No, no, no.
we're short on Foundry updates.
I always try and make it nice because I
Yeah,
try and be a nice guy. The only thing that makes me
Well,
not want to
well,
be a
also,
nice guy
also
is people
it's
not
the old
being nice on the forums.
philosophy of how you catch more flies with honey than vinegar.
yeah. At this point, I think most of the updates we do get are probably, I don't want to call them sympathy updates, but because they there are those that do appreciate the Foundry and want to make it better.
Hmm.
And this is stuff that oftentimes people will do above and beyond their normal job.
Oh yeah. Um, Zero. I mean, the old story was that Zero or Zeronius Rex was she sort of self-taught herself to put things in the Foundry and did it on her own time.
Yeah, and we got a number of assets through her.
Hmm. I think also when Taco built Utopia Planitia and put it in the Foundry, I think he did that on his own time.
Yeah,
I may be wrong about that, but I think
Well,
that's what I remember.
it it was a bit glitchy in the first iteration, but it was still awesome to have it.
yeah.
Because he hadn't done it before. So there were some things that he
Certain
didn't
things
know,
didn't
like that you had to lock
like
the
the
doors open, and there was one thing I
uh,
wish he would have kept.
Oh, the
the
Cougar
Thunder
Thunder Falcon
Cougar
Bird.
Falcon Bird.
Yeah, Thunder Cougar Falconbird. Damn it! Why did that have to go away?
We can.
I had it just in case anyone wants to see it.
We still have it in our dreams.
I still have the banner I made for my signature on the forums, which is "Screw the whales, save the Thunder Cougar Falconbird."
Anyway,
Actually, if 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 you want to see the Thunder Cougar Falcon Bird's little cousins, you can look at the old ESD map, the original ESD map, and put the player in the shipyard on the original ESD map because it has a similar holographic ship display. Well, or rather, six of them, which have a similar, I guess you could say, glitch. But they don't show like 12 ships stacked on top of each other. It's like three or four per hologram. Still, though, it looks cool.
Sir Boulevard says that he was talking to Taco and Tribble, and I should say that Taco was awesome. Has been doing a lot of stuff where he goes on Tribble and talks to people right after a new update, talks to people about his ESD map. And he said Taco told him that the reason that he doesn't put stuff in the Foundry too often was because when he's done at work, he likes to go home and rest. And I absolutely understand that, because I'm a big proponent of, when the workday is done, the workday is done.
yeah.
And, obviously, if any devs do anything for us on their own time, just immensely grateful
I like
for
the idea
that.
about buying or offering to buy pizza for devs willing to come over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. We're more than willing to do anything like that. Pizza, Orion girls, anything like that. um, yeah, those guys absolutely earn the rest, because I know they work long hours. I mean, we remember from our interview with Kestrel. I mean, she was saying that even she, the story person, was working long, long hours around a season update. So
Yeah.
I think what it needs is for um, the the top brass to get excited about it and get it on the schedule.
Yeah.
And we don't know that they haven't done that for sure. Um, but I mean, they need to schedule time for it rather than have that. I mean, that's the way we're going to get significant updates.
And I like to think that slowly but surely we're getting more and more uh, insider supporters. I know we've got a couple. I know Brandon was one for a very long time, although he's not as active in Stowe because he's now overseeing all of
Yeah, but
PWE's
he's
games.
not around though.
No, but yeah, I mean, I know we've got a few supporters, and
One thing Hippie said in the
Actually,
chat
if you
was
want to find brand,
go ahead, Mark.
if you want to find brand, if you want to find brand flakes, look on the Champions forum. Apparently, he shows up there too.
I know he was a big Champions player, as I recall. Hippiejohn said in the chat room that if he wins the lottery, he's going to buy Cryptic. I think we can all probably say that that might be in our plans if we were to suddenly win enough
I don't
money
know
to
how
do it.
big of a jackpot would you have to win in order to buy Cryptic.
Well, what was it they bought that PWE bought it for? 40 million? Something like that?
I know it's been so long I don't remember.
Obviously, it's a much, I think probably in a much stronger position now and would sell for a lot more.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you don't have.
If PWE would even sell it, who knows?
Well, we'll just have to buy all the
I
shares
doubt
in
they
PWE.
But I admit, in an idle moment when I'm trying to fall asleep or something, I think to myself, if I bought Cryptic, I could tell them to put a huge emphasis on the Foundry. An idle daydream. I'm going to Star Trek Vegas this year. If I come back and I've won a huge jackpot, you never
let,
know.
let me ask an odd question: is like if we did buy Cryptic and did have them put a huge emphasis on the Foundry, would that actually be a good thing for the game?
It's hard to say. I mean, you would have to really sit down and think about how you would do it and how you would make it benefit the whole game.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those
And I
points.
and I think there are ways. And I said a lot of them last week.
But I mean,
Is integrate the Foundry into the rest of the game a lot more.
yeah, I mean, but the point I was trying to make is that when Cryptic prioritizes things, they have to look at the health of the game as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Absolutely.
and that always has to be at the forefront of their mind. So I mean, as much as we like the Foundry, there are obviously other things that they need to do in order to keep the game healthy.
Oh, and absolutely. I mean, triaging and prioritizing is something you have to do in every business, pretty
Yeah,
much. You have to. I mean, I'm constantly doing that. I have to say to myself, okay, I can't go to this middle school football game because the high school game is scheduled at the same time or whatever. So it's like, I have to not do this thing in order to do this thing, which I have to place a higher priority on because it's going to, more people are going to want to know about it.
Andrew,
In
why do
my
you hate
case.
middle school?
Yeah, no, and I've had people come into my office and said, why aren't you covering this? It's like, because I have to triage. I only have so much resources.
You can only be
Rogue
in one
Enterprise
place at
brings
one time.
yes, Rogue Enterprise brings up the issue, of course, of monetizing.
Unfortunately, there's just not enough authors.
I think probably, yeah.
It wouldn't be worth it for them to even set up the system to monetize the Foundry.
Mm-hmm.
And in fairness, they wouldn't do it because the Foundry works.
They've come out and said they don't want to do it.
Yeah, the Foundry works better for them as an unmonetized system than it would as a monetized system.
And of course, it is slightly monetized right now because it does cost dilithium to get slots, but obviously,
yeah. Well, that's
dilithium is only a semi-monetized currency.
They only do that because so that someone
They
can't
have at least a
just
slight,
create.
yeah.
They can't create new new accounts and just automatically jump into the Foundry. That said, 10,000 dilithium is not a lot of dilithium.
Yeah, it's a little bit over 1 day's dilithium.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just the only reason it's there is to prevent like people from botting the Foundry.
which doesn't work entirely.
Yeah, it's a little more involved.
It at least slows it down
Yeah,
greatly.
I'm sure it slows it down, but so the last topic I think for the night is one of the things that Cryptic has been doing a lot lately is going back and redoing some of their story. And I want to see what you guys think about that. About going back and redoing their story. What are some of the challenges and the pitfalls that you can go into? I mean, have you guys done any of that in your Foundry missions?
Well, as it happens, I just got done making some tweaks and updates,
Mm-hmm.
although nothing too huge. It was mostly just a.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of minor tweaks to try and keep things in line between parts 1 and 2 as I flush out part 2, but nothing that particularly we'd consider a great change to the story.
Mm-hmm.
I've made a ton of mostly little revisions to both Ghosts of War and Valley of the Shadow, both to kind of harmonize the two stories, since Valley of the Shadow is supposed to be a prequel to Ghosts of War, and also to try and keep them in line, as both and closely in line with the Stowe storyline as I can. Whenever I find something new, or whenever Stowe changes the story on me, which doesn't happen. Thankfully, doesn't happen that often, at least
But it
not to
does.
the
But it
degree
does
that I
happen.
have to. Yeah.
Now, when you were writing your prequel missions, did you create any story problems for yourself in your existing missions that you then had to go back and fix?
I seem to remember there were a few that I had to go. That they weren't so much big problems as basically enhancements, things that I could add to the opportunities to add to my pre-existing series. I can't remember any specific examples offhand right at the moment.
Well, I remember one from, and obviously, these things crop up in collaborative missions. In Purity 6, there was, I made the mission and put it up for the other members of the team to play, and then suddenly, one of the guys comes in and says, "Hey, you captured this one character in a previous mission. He should still be on your ship. You should at least acknowledge him." And I was like, "Oh crap." Yeah, because obviously that's a story element that I did not carry through, um, and actually became a good little story beat. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I think one time, if you're making sequels, you got to figure out continuity, and sometimes it creates a problem that you need to go back and add a character in to a previous one, or get rid of a character from a future one, things like that. The big one that I remember us talking about is, of course, the Vega colony.
Yes.
Crypt just kind of made a problem for themselves there, and I don't think they still have yet to resolve it. I think even in the stuff on Tribble
Oh,
is there's this assimilated colony right in the middle of Federation space in the home sector even, and it's just sitting there assimilated. Why isn't anybody doing anything about it?
well, I don't
How
know,
about
because I remember seeing somebody post a picture of something that they did on Tribble recently, which showed them at the place where you get your original kit from the people on Vega Colony, where you're shooting Borg. So I guess your character still goes there at some point to deal with the Borg there.
Well, I haven't played any of the new revamped Borg missions. Have you guys?
I've played the first two, and there's anything to do with the Vega colony. Knight Templar in the chat room is wondering what retcon means, and
Retroactive continuity
retroactive.
change.
Yeah, there you go. Retroactive continuity change. So it's essentially where you go back and change something that you did before to fit your current storyline. So I can pull up TV tropes here and find a good example. I've been obviously considering doing a lot of revamps to my first 5-part series, and I'm kind of wondering. So Boulevard says he's played all the missions and no, the Vega colony does not appear again, sadly.
I'm
So
still
they still
calling
haven't
it.
fixed that story point.
I'm still calling it now. The Vega colony will replace the Borg
Different
ground
invasion
zone. Yeah, the Differa invasion zone.
And you know, I think that'd be a perfect fit for it.
Well,
Yeah.
Essentially,
well. Also, one thing to consider is that the Kittimer Accord missions, didn't those take place on or in orbit of Vega?
Oh, you mean the STFs?
Yeah.
No. Well, in theory, the ground portion is supposed to take place beneath the surface of Vega.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
yeah,
so
originally,
that's kind of
there
like,
was a whole section of the mission where you track the Borg back in time to Vega, and then you like beam down and or helping your past self, or by weakening the Borg.
okay. Here's the like prime example of retcons is the Klingon makeup. Obviously, the Klingons in TOS look very, very different from the Klingons in TNG and the motion picture and onwards. So the change was obviously made as a behind the scenes thing because they had a bigger budget to do makeup on the motion picture and going forwards, and it was just never explained until you get to DS9 and Worf goes back and sort of turns it into we do not talk about that, and then eventually on Enterprise resolve the matter once and for all. So that now when you go back and watch TOS, you know that the smooth forehead Klingons are because of, X, Y, and Z from Enterprise. Even though, obviously, the writers at the time weren't thinking like that.
So riddle me this: when did the Eugenics Force happen, despite the fact that Voyager went back in time to the very same time as the wars were supposed to be ending, and everything is normal?
Everything was normal where they were. If you read the Federation First 150 Years book, it actually says that San Francisco, which I think is the city they go to, if I'm not very much mistaken,
Yeah.
Was one of the few cities left untouched by the wars.
Yeah, I don't think that's enough to explain it.
No, I mean there's a whole lot of inconsistency in Star Trek. I mean, you could spend hours and hours and hours talking about it.
Yeah, I mean another great retcon is the warp 10 threshold, which was frequently broken in TOS.
Oh yeah.
Yep. I mean, because the funny thing there is that the Enterprise itself got accelerated to speeds greater than warp 10 on more than one occasion in TOS.
So I think they put a lot more rules on things when TNG rolled around.
Yeah, they formalized a lot of rules.
Yeah.
Well, some of which were stupid, like having warp 10 be defined as infinite velocity. That was just dumb, but it's what they did.
Well, they converted to the metric system.
The metric system isn't that dumb.
And Sir Boulevard makes the point that Enterprise itself is a retcon. I don't think he's a fan, but I think he's quite right in that sense, especially with and you see it the most, I think, when in the Mirror Universe episode where they go on the TOS look in Constitution class, and everybody's going, God, look how advanced this all is.
I'll tell you what, I've never seen a Connie look so good.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean,
Lighting
because
helped a lot.
they really did do a recreation of the sets used in the original series with modern props
And
and
then
rebuilding everything to a modern standard instead of using the old approach, which was basically stereo knobs glued to cardboard. I wish I was kidding, but you know.
I'll tell you though, going back to our earlier topic of how to be a better writer, there's also how to be a better map builder, is to look at the way that they build sets for movies and stuff. Only building what you need and no more. Where obviously in a lot of shows, like especially TV shows, you don't need to see a ceiling, so they never built a ceiling.
Yep. I mean, did you watch the final episode of the Bill Cosby Show?
No.
Well, see, because in the last episode of the show, you have them go do like everything like in a normal episode. Then at the end of the episode, the camera zooms out so that you can see the stage around the people, not just the part that the camera would normally be focused on. And then you see the actors walk off the set. I mean, it was just one of those things that was like majorly fourth wall breaking, but
Yeah, but it's the last episode of the season or of the show. Why not?
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it
And
was
always, of course,
cool seeing, I guess, that sort of behind the scenes sort of thing that you wouldn't normally see.
and of course the Enterprise bridges, plural, were always built sort of modular, so that you could remove walls, and so you could stick the camera there, and it
yeah.
could look whatever direction you needed it to look.
You ever wonder why our interiors are so big? It's because they can't pull out walls to make room for the camera.
Yep.
This is true.
And
Even the ones,
I
even
like
the
the
ones
big
that are,
interiors.
yeah, I don't mind them either. But even the ones that are maybe a little bit more appropriately sized, like the Defiant ones, are not quite true to what they would be in the shows.
Yeah, and even then they were pushing the limits. I mean,
The,
and
the, the,
and if,
the TOS interior feels positively claustrophobic.
yeah, and
And of
they're
course,
trying to do
a lot of people
battle
don't
in it.
realize how cramped the sets on these shows were.
Yeah,
Because if you use like a wide angle lens, it's going to look bigger than it is.
On these sets for TOS, there are actually several points where you can actually see that the actors could literally reach out and touch both sides of the hallway with their hands at the same time.
Mm-hmm. But if you use a particular kind of lens on it, it's going to look much bigger. It's just the weird things that cameras do.
Well,
and of course,
I mean,
sometimes they also cheat.
Well,
Go ahead.
an easy way to cheat is to simply not show things taking up the entire room. Like you don't show like 3 or 4 people walking around each other in the hallways. That would just emphasize how small it is. You just see people walking smoothly with no obstructions. So people don't consciously realize that there's little room. They just they focus more on the fact that people have plenty of room to do what they need.
Oh yeah. And and one of my favorites is I was listening to a commentary on the first season of The West Wing, where they had built lots of sets for the interior of the White House, and they wanted to show that there's lots of people, tons and tons of people working there. So what they had is for some of their doors, they just had, behind the door was just a tiny little alcove that was big enough for a person to stand in, and then on cue, the person would walk out of that door and go in another door. It was just a tiny little cubicle on the other side of the hallway. And another person would come and walk and open that door and go in. So it looked like, there were people walking everywhere and going between doors and going through different hallways, when just all it was just tiny little alcoves.
Hippiejohn says to stop explaining the magic.
I have more.
But teaching people the magic. Oh,
like how in Firefly, where you look one way and they're on a set, and you look the other way and a different camera angle and they're on location, and it just they match it. Yes, we're ruining everybody's world by explaining the magic. But I love watching behind the scenes stuff, and I think, hopefully maybe it makes me a little bit better at map design because I watch how the experts do it.
I remember when Stargate SG-1 was doing the Wormhole Extreme episode, and
oh, that's hilarious.
Those are good.
in fact, in the commentary, they were talking about how they thought about doing like this actual behind the scenes like thing at the end, and then they
Oh,
said, no, we really don't want to break or really blow away the magic, so they instead did a behind the scenes of the fake show about on the show.
well, one of my favorite comments about that is that the special effects designers mentioned that they had originally thought about having the Stargate constantly spinning while the wormhole was open, when they were doing the designs for the actual show, and that's an idea that they simply scrapped for the actual show, but they went and put it into the Wormhole Extreme uh, fictional show.
I didn't think that their gate spun at all.
Well, and
Well,
it's cut.
it rotates while it's locking the chevrons, and then it stops moving.
Well, not
Um,
in Wormhole Extreme, but I guess they never actually
I'm not
showed
sure
the
if they
gate
showed it,
active.
but
It,
that's even one of the things on TV tropes. It's a trope is that everything's better with spinning.
It is.
Well, I
That
don't
was
know.
that was like the best prop ever that had spun.
I don't know if any of you have ever read the Making of Deep Space Nine. It's an old trade paperback that was published, I think, after like second or third season of DS9. But that is just a really fascinating look into pretty much every phase of the making of the episode. The script writing, from to building sets to visual effects and everything. So I don't know. I would imagine that's long since been out of print. But if you can find it, I would highly recommend it.
You might be able to. Another good resource is on some of the DVDs, and they aren't on some of the Blu-rays that I have, but they're on the old DVDs. Michael Okuda and his wife did text commentaries on the movies, on the Star Trek movies, that are just full of awesome facts like that. Like, X, such and such set later became the Enterprise sick bay, and such and such plot or prop was recycled into this, and cool things like that.
Yeah, it's funny. Last month, um, Tumerboy was talking on the forums with a bunch of people about the Deep Space Nine and the fact that the promenade is like only a third of a ring. The set is only covers like a third of the ring,
Oh yeah, the original
and so
DS9 set. Yeah.
so he was saying it's like, well, yeah, but the rest of it is just the first portion duplicated again.
Which, if you notice in Stowe,
eh,
the halves kind of mirror each other. If you go around, you see things that look very similar.
Yeah, so it's like
to a
two
certain
replimats
extent,
and
yeah.
Pretty much.
all right. So we're good at wrapping up point.
Yeah, let's wrap it up here. And
All right. So contact.
contact.
All right. Anyone who wants to contact us, you can email us at foundryroundtable@live.com. You can send us mission reviews or missions that you want us to review. If you guys have a set that you want us to, or location that you want us to shoot from, feel free to send those in. Just provide a table for us. Or even discussion topics that you think you guys want us to cover. Feel free to send those in. You can also find us on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. You can also follow Drogan on Twitter at Drogan1701. You can follow Hippiejohn at Hippie_John. And you can follow me at Greendragoon.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
All right.
Thanks
Good night,
for having
everyone.
me on again.
It was great to have you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
And let us know when part 3 is out.
Okay, like I said, that might still be a while. One because of real life stuff, and also because two of the maps that I still have to build are going to be really pretty complex custom maps.
Bigger, better, more complex.
Yep.
All right. Well, good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.